Hey everyone, in today's video I'm going to be showing how I've made King crazy, including some tips I personally have on how you can make bosses yourself as well if you want. This is only going to be in classic mode as I have I have zero platformer experience, right? So yeah, I would be opening mutant right in here. Don't mind these other levels. Uh, we're gonna be being mutant. Oh, you don't see anything. You didn't see anything. All right, all right. Let's go over how I beat this boss. As you can see, oh man, oh god, there's a lot of triggers right here. It took me hours. It took me many hours to make this. And to make King crazy, it kind of used a bunch of move triggers along with all these scale triggers, rotation triggers to animate the entire boss fight. I can show you actually. Hold on. Let's place a start position. Alright. So, how I make King crazy, don't mind these hands. I don't know why these are here. These are placeholders. The boss itself actually comprises of two forms. The first form is this circle right here. You see this circle? This is what animates in the background as you go through this section. And I used a bunch of keyframes right here. It goes in circles, right? And then it goes forward and up, right? It goes forward and up. And then this is like the last keyframe where it then stops, right? So whenever you go into playtest, you can see it stop. And then King Crazy appears through an alpha trigger, which I just used. The transition isn't as smooth as I hoped, but you know what? I don't care. It works and it works. And then boom, you got the boss itself. Which, the boss itself, if you haven't noticed, is sideways. Which, it's hard to look at because it's sideways, but like if you like flip your screen on your side, you will see how it would normally look if the camera wasn't rotated. And as you can see, you have the whole arena right here, which I built, and then you have the boss itself, which is actually animated. How it's animated, oh man. So if you want to animate bosses, it depends on the boss and how it's designed, really. But with King Crazy, it was pretty simple. As you can see here, we got tons of triggers written down. I had to write all this down because I didn't want to forget which triggers did what, right? Because there's a lot of different groups that do different things, and I had to write them down. That's one thing I would recommend, right? I would recommend writing down groups if you're doing a boss because like there's going to be a lot of different movements that you're probably going to reuse, and you might as well have them written down when you need to reuse those groups, right? Like for example, the face animations. I have each of them right here. You have the this face. I have them all written down. This is the if you don't know what this is supposed to be the mouth. This is supposed to be the eyes, right? And you have each face, right? And you have the scales for each of those faces, right? Because these are for the animations for the faces, right? Like whenever you go through the boss, you can see his mouth close and open. Which I did using scale triggers, right? Not only that, but I had to do it on the x-axis because everything's flipped on its side, right? So, as an example, this moves 20 in the y direction. So it moves up, but since the screen is flipped, it's actually moving left. You know? Yeah. And yeah, I just animated the boss using move triggers, and it just moves up, and it just the hands themselves are animated with keyframes. As you can see, they just swoop down. But besides that, yeah, let's move on. Uh, the next thing is more hand movements, as you can see. These are the keyframes for those movements. And then you have the the cannons, right? The cannons. All these triggers make up the cannons. These triggers right here, these make up all of the movements for the cannons. For the first part, and then you have the second part. But let's just stick with the first part. This is really complicated, but I'll simplify it. These keyframes move each of the bullets in a certain direction. Because I wanted the bullets to move in one direction, and I feel like using a move trigger would limit me in what direction they can move in. So I used keyframes instead. And yeah, you can actually see the bullets too right here. Um, those are the indicators. These blocks right here are the indicators for the cannons that appear. And yeah, you have right here, you have the bullets themselves, right? And it has a spike, right? And then of course you have the indicators for the hand attacks that come down, right? You have this. It moves, so it's just one object. It's just this. And then every time the boss, oh wait, never mind. Yeah, it just reappears. And then you have the second attacks. This looks like a mess. It may look messy, but these are keyframes meant to animate the lasers themselves, right? These lasers, these like animate with the keyframes. And yeah, that's the laser attack. It just shoots them. It follows the screen too, so that you know, it stays on screen. And then yeah, it just shoots each of them. Each of them has a hitbox too. So if you're curious, uh, there we go. I use these blocks right here. Um, these they're pretty useful. Because you can bend them in any shape and you can warp them to fit whatever you want them to use for, right? It's a better way of using creating hitboxes. Oh, I didn't mean to open that. But yeah, you have that and then you have this. But yeah, I just use these. And then after that, you have this attack, which you know, I just used a bunch of objects. Pretty simple, right? It's nothing crazy. No pun intended. And then of course, you got the projectiles that come from King Crazy himself, right? They just shoot out in a circle. And it's easier to do that with keyframes, right? I feel like it's just easier to do that with keyframes. Keyframes make it easier. And then you have the hand movements right here. So yeah, that's King Crazy. Simplified. I don't want to go too in depth because all these triggers are so complicated that this took me hours. You don't want to believe how long this took. But yeah, the creating the boss was actually pretty easy, right? Hold on, I have a wait, never mind, I deleted it. But yeah, I have the bosses right here. You know, it's just pretty much comprised of like simple blocks that you could find in the editor, right? Like for example, if I can like the body itself is just made of simple objects, and the horns, these are actually just spikes, right? And the face is just made up of these objects right here, and it's just layered perfectly to where it just blends in, right? And you have a bit of glow, and then you have the crown, which is actually just made of a bunch of spikes, right? Because like spikes are pretty much triangles, so that's what I used. And then you have the second form. Oh boy, the second form was a pain to make. This I don't know how I'm gonna explain it, but basically it's pretty much the same with the body, but you know, with the mouth, it's a bunch of circles pretty much. Like as you can see, it's just a bunch of circles. Which after you stack them all together, it just creates the mouth, right? And then the eyes are just circles with these layers, with these objects layered on top, right? And then you have the horns. Oh man, you won't believe how long these things took to make. I was struggling a lot to make these. It uses a bunch of objects, right? Just uses a bunch of objects to create the horns. These are actually just spikes. Use more spikes in your builds. You won't believe how spikes can be used to create certain shapes. Like I use a spike right here to create the horn, the top, right? Even the bottom, I used a spike, but then I surrounded it with like these to round off the bottom, and then I created these to thicken out the horn, right? And you have the second layer, which is just the inside that's uprighter color, and then the third layer, which is just this creates the look of the horn, right? It makes it look round, right? These objects make it look round, right? I just used a bunch of half circle objects and just placed them and layered them correctly to where it just fits, right? And yeah, that's how I make King Crazy. It's not that hard. It's probably hard, but uh, but like in the end, it wasn't too bad, right? Like in the end, this was not too bad to make. I still have more coming up, but that's for later. I'm still working on this. Um, oh yeah. Some tips I have for bosses. Um, for starters, for making the design, try looking at what objects you can use. You can use a bunch of objects. You can use circle objects. You can like scale them up, whip them up. This isn't the best circle objects to warp up because it's small and blurry. So I would probably instead of that, I would recommend using these. You can copy and paste it and just make a circle out of them. And then you could just zoom it out. And look at that. It's not that blurry, right? It's not as blurry, right? You can use that. You can use a bunch of other objects. I don't know if this is animated or not. I don't think it is. But yeah, you can just experiment, right? You can use a bunch of these objects. There's a ton of objects you can use to create shapes and just create whatever you want to make, right? Just experiment, right? These are pixelated objects, but yeah, that's my big tip for when designing bosses is just look at what um objects there are and what you can use to create certain shapes. Because after you can create certain shapes, you can pretty much draw anything in the game. It can pretty much like it's kind of like drawing almost, like you draw something, but you just build it with shapes, right? You got spikes. This can be used to create. This can be used as a triangle. You can warp it around, right? You can warp it. You can you can do whatever. These are just some simple things, right? There's also slopes you can use. That's also uh something you can use to create certain shapes. I haven't used any myself yet, but yeah, it's something you can do. You can warp it into pretty much any sort of slope you want. Same goes with these ones. You can yeah, just you get what I'm saying. And another thing is learn how to use triggers and learn how they and just experiment with easing, right? Find the best easing that works for you, right? That's what I do, right? Personally, myself, I just mess around with the easing until I find something that works, right? Something that looks smooth and something that looks good, right? and something that fits whatever I'm trying to make, right? Like let's say we want to move this, let's say we want to move this object out, and we place a move trigger right here, and then we could just mess around with the easing, right? We could just make it move up 20, and then just, personally, I like using a sign out for a lot of things and sign in. But there's also other things like back out. Back out is personally my favorite because it's smooth and it's just, yeah, it just balances out, right? Like you can just increase the duration. And yeah, you see how smooth that looks, right? Just experiment with easing and just find something that works for you, right? There's a bunch of different easings. I don't use balance anymore. It's not necessarily my favorite easing. And yeah, just experiment with easing until you find something. That's what I have for movements. This works as well with rotation triggers and scale and pretty much anything that uses easing, including keyframes. Uh, Keyframes as well uses easing, but I personally myself I haven't used any easing for keyframes because I didn't really need to use any. But if you do, just experiment until you find something that, just looks good. What else? Camera movements. Something with camera is that you can actually do a lot with the camera to make your level more dynamic. You could make the level constantly zoom in and out. Not by a lot to make it disturbing to the player, but you could like make the camera pulse in and out every now and then to the music. Or like you can even do rotates. You can do a lot with cameras. You can do a lot with the camera triggers. It is pretty cool, honestly. And of course, you have shaders, which can add another layer of detail to your levels, depending on how you use them. Right? I wouldn't say just overuse them and go crazy, but like, if it fits your level, just go ahead and use them. Right? Like, you want to use the lens circle. I don't have preview shaders on. You can turn on the lens circle and create the size that you want. You could change the hue actually, which I find unique because you can do a lot with the hue trigger. Like for example, in one part of Mutant, I used the hue trigger instead of just changing all of the colors, right? Because it was easier to do. But it also changed all the hue of all the objects, and it honestly it made it fit together pretty well. And you have other shaders like Shockwave, Shockline, Glitch. I like this one a lot. Chromatic, Chromatic Glitch, Pixelate. I'm just going crazy right now with these. But yeah, there's a lot you can use with these for your level. And yeah, just experiment. And we know with bosses, just whenever you create their design, just experiment with their shapes, right? And then, you can animate them, right? You can animate them with move triggers and rotate triggers, scale triggers, keyframe triggers. That's what I did with King Crazy, and I'm pretty sure you could too if you make a boss. This is only in classic mode. Bosses in classic mode are more cinematic than anything, right? Like, they're not as interactive compared to platformer mode. I haven't made any bosses in platformer mode yet, and I don't know how to. But you know what? I plan to learn that eventually, and you know what? I bet you could too. So yeah, that's it for how I made King Crazy and some tips on how I have about bosses. If you liked the video, feel free to subscribe and like the video too. It really helps out a lot. And yeah, that's all I have. thanks for watching. Goodbye. I'll make more videos soon. And yeah, that's it.